You know. Here's the DC Metro. This is what we're going to be talking about in terms of our stats. And we report out on all these 9 little regions you can see in the Bright service area. So here's the way that I tend to track what's going on. This chart shows the number of monthly closed sales here in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, or metro area, whatever. The light blue line is 2023. The dark blue line are monthly sales in 24. And then the orange line is this year, the first 3 months of 2025. You guys are getting a little sneak peek. We put out the March monthly report on the 10th, which is tomorrow. So you're getting a little bit of a sneak peek here. The gray area is actually like where monthly home sales would be, kind of the range going back to 2018 through 2024. So by any measures, you can see home sales activity has been very slow compared to historic norms. We're down in 2025, in the beginning of 2025, compared to where we were in 2024, but we saw a little bit of an uptick in March. So one of the things that I'm always make sure I compare to is not only where we are this year, and not always just comparing to where we were last year, because as you all know, the last few years have been really, really unusual. So I like to compare to this broader year range from 2018 to 2024 to kind of see, where would be maybe more typical. And so that's why I often like to show a little bit of a historical trend. The other thing I like to show is what's going on within the region, because as we're going to see, housing market conditions are really varied depending on where you are in the metro area. And I would argue even drilling down into the counties, as you know, the neighborhood by neighborhood differences are pretty significant. But you can see DC Metro through the end of March, home sales up 1.1% compared to 2024. But as I mentioned, still very low when you look back the last 6 years. Look what's driving that, though. Loudoun County is where home sales up nearly 11% year over year, while Alexandria, Arlington, Prince George's County, even you can see compared to a year ago, we're having fewer home sales. The other thing I like to do is compare DC Metro with the overall Bright footprint. And this is really important as we're trying to figure out whether DOGE and cuts to the federal workforce, return to the office mandates for the federal government workforce, whether those are having an effect on our housing market. So one way I like to try and gauge that is I compare the Washington area market to the overall Bright footprint, because if something looks different in the DC area, it might be because we're seeing an extra effect of the federal workforce changes. As you can see right now, through the first quarter, home sales in the DC Metro are up faster than they are in the overall Bright footprint, which, as I mentioned, includes Philadelphia, includes Baltimore, parts of central PA, the Eastern Shore, and so on. Closed sales are kind of looking back, though. So if we wanted to look at pending sales, right, these are the number of offers on homes, contracts, not offers, the number of contracts on homes each month, same kind of chart. You can see a similar pattern. But if you notice, look in January and February, that's the orange line where new pending contracts were lower, even lower than they were a year ago, which was very low. And that's primarily due to the fact that mortgage rates were higher than expected in January, and that uncertainty around, I think, the changing presidential administration played a role. But look what happened in March, a sharp uptick in home sales, in pending sales activity here in the DC Metro, which I think sort of like some of the activity, some of the contract activity that didn't happen in January and February, we're starting to see it play out in March. If you look over on the right, though, you can see compared to a year ago, we're still seeing fewer new pending sales for the metropolitan area, for the metro region, compared to where we were a year ago. You can see the DC Metro is down a little bit more than the overall Bright footprint is across the Bright MLS service area. We're seeing the number of new pending contracts down 2.8% year over year. But as I mentioned, lots of differences across local markets. Look at Loudoun again. If for those of you who are working with buyers and sellers in Loudoun County, still a lot of activity in Loudoun County. busier than Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria. And this is, again, why it's important to kind of look at the individual counties as you're sharing information with your clients. I know there's a lot of like media reporting about like the housing market at the national level. And I mean, that's like, your clients don't care what's going on at the national level. What they care about is what's going on here. And by here, I mean the neighborhoods, the communities that they're most interested in looking at homes or looking to sell. We look at buy-side activity, that is the number of people closing on homes, the number of people making offers on homes. And then we also, of course, want to know what's happening with pricing. Even though home sales activity is slower, so people might say, oh, well, the housing market is slower than a year ago. And that's fair based on the data we just saw. But some people might interpret that to say, oh, well, that means home prices are falling. What we're actually seeing is that home prices here in the Washington area are still rising. Instead of showing home prices month to month, because there's a lot of seasonality in that data, instead I show the year over year change in home prices. So you can see back in 2020, 2021, home prices were rising 10, 15% year over year. We had a little bit of a dip in 2023, but since then we're seeing in 2024, all the way through March, home prices still rising here in the Washington area, median price up 5.7% in 2025 compared to where we were a year ago. We are a higher cost market than most of the rest of the Bright footprint, but you can see our home prices here are rising faster than they are in the Bright MLS service area overall. And so you can see, again, looking across the different counties, how there's some variation in home prices. One thing I want to point out is we do talk about this sort of median home price and the change year over year. What that doesn't account for is the mix of homes sold in any given period. So what I mean by that is if you see home prices maybe falling year over year, it could be that the market's softening and that the median price reflects truly less demand for homes in the market. Or it could mean that in that market, more lower price point homes were on the market and sold. More condos were sold compared to a year ago when it was more single family homes. So that's why I really also think it's important as we're drilling into these data and the reports that we have access to, that we look at home price data, not just at the median for the overall market, but also by housing type. And so we've seen in our market that single family home prices have been rising faster than, let's say, condos. That could change, though, as buyers are more apt to need to be looking for more affordable options. But so if you look at all these numbers here, you can see by county, the median sold price for single family detached homes, for townhomes, and for condos. And then you can see the change from a year ago. So in Fairfax County, median sold price for a single family detached home, almost $1 million, $970,000, up 5% year over year. If you look across the jurisdictions in general, not always, but in general, we've seen faster price appreciation among single family detached homes. That's where inventory has been the lowest. That's where demand has outpaced supply generally. And so we can see that those markets operate a little bit differently. It's not just the type of home, but also the price point. So we put out a quarterly report on the luxury market. And by way of example, on the left, there's a chart that shows the share of home sales in the DC Metro that were all cash. And the dark orange line are luxury sales, and the light orange line is the overall market. So there are more than a third of luxury home sales in the DC area market were all cash. And that is a higher share than we see in the overall market. This is fascinating to me. I mean, we've seen stories of some high profile sales. Mark Zuckerberg just bought a home here. We had the highest priced sale in 3 years it was either McLean or Potomac. I can't remember which one. The luxury market has been doing really, really well. And we've reported on that through 2024. 2025 could be a little bit different, though. And so that's why we're starting to look at different segments of the market differently. The luxury market is more sensitive to stock market changes, and we know what's been going on in the stock market recently, and we could see a pullback in some of those luxury buyers. But on the right, you can see the luxury market in the DC metro is defined at homes listed at 1.7 million and higher. That's the top 5% of home sales. 1.7 might not feel like luxury in some of the local markets close in. I get that, but that's the threshold we used. And you can see compared to a year ago, more cash sales or a higher share of cash sales, but fewer homes are selling above list price, and inventory is pretty stagnant. Homes are selling pretty fast, but new listing activity is pretty slow. So we're starting to see some changes in the luxury market relative to the overall market. So this is another sort of piece of the puzzle that is relevant, of course, to buyers and sellers who might be in that part of the market. I mentioned supply a little bit, so that's the other
Lisa,
side of the story.
Can I interrupt you? Are you able to move the, do you see that icon at the bottom of the chart that says stop sharing? Can you see that? We're just wondering if you could move that out of the way. There you go.
Can move it.
Thank you.
You want to see the whole slide. I see. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. The inventory is the supply side of the housing market, right? Of course. And so in addition to tracking monthly closed sales, monthly pending sales, that's new pending contracts, home prices by home type, by kind of price segment or segment of the market, tracking inventory is also very, very important. In fact, I think the supply side, the new listing and inventory side is kind of the whole ball game when it comes to where the housing market's going to go this year. But as we can see, this is bar charts that show at the end of the month how many listings were available for sale, either in coming soon or active status in our Bright data for the Washington, D.C. metro area. So our data exclude data that aren't coming through the MLS. So new construction sometimes doesn't come through the MLS. Increasingly, there are listings that are being held as office exclusive or private exclusive listings. And for now, those aren't in our monthly reports either. And we can come back to that in just a bit and how we might think through that. But inventory has been rising. And I think people are going to hear that. They're going to hear, oh, inventory is increasing, listings are increasing. That should make it easy for me as a buyer. And while I think it is going to be a little bit easier to be a buyer if you are in the market this spring, inventory is still really low. And the single family inventory in particular is still well below where we were in 2019. And if you look on the right, you can see months of supply, which is one measure of sort of the balance or lack of balance in the housing market, is still pretty low. Like there's still 2 months of supply, DC metro wide. You can see the city itself, Washington, DC, is really driving that metric higher because in Alexandria, in Fairfax, in Loudoun County, there's still less than 2 months of supply in the market. We've typically thought maybe 3 to 5 months of supply is the sign of a balanced housing market. And while inventory is increasing and while buyers are starting to have a little bit more leverage or had been starting to have a little bit more leverage, it's still a seller's market by this metric in most parts of the Washington, D.C. area.
Lisa, so I had a question on this graph, because did you say coming soon was included in this count?
That's correct. So we include coming soon in this count. Yep.
What's the logic behind that? Because it's not available to show, it seems like there's no equivalent mechanism for like buyers who are out there writing offers. So
for sure.
And it just seems odd to me that would be included in available inventory.
For sure. And it is, I really appreciate the question. It's something that we are actually taking a pretty hard look at. About 45% of all listings that come through the Bright system start as coming soon. So in the past, prior to, I believe, August, a listing could only stay in coming soon for 2 weeks, right? So including them in these inventory counts when we're looking at a whole month's worth of data didn't seem like a super big deal, right? As you point out, for those 2 weeks, they're not being shown, they're not sort of broadly available. now that coming soon status has expanded, including coming soon listings in this inventory count, in my opinion, starts to get a little problematic for the reason that you mentioned. Please know that we're rethinking maybe how to think through this. And I might actually propose a couple different inventory measures. One that's just more like, okay, what listings have been entered into our system in any sort of status? And then how many listings are truly available for buyers to see? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the way we have to go with this because of policy changes within Bright, because of, frankly, business practice changes and how brokers are sort of treating new listings. I think we need to rethink how we share this out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I'll come back to that too. We do days on market's another one. We're going to have to, I think, revisit a little bit. But for this purpose, what I wanted to talk about was we often talk about statistics in the housing market. We talk about medians. And so what I'm showing here in the dark line is the median days on market here in the DC metro area. And then I'm also showing in the lighter line the average days on market. The median, I'm sure you remember from your statistics class, is if you took all the homes that were sold and sort of lined them up from fewest days on the market to the most days on the market, the median is the one in the middle. So it's sort of a measure of kind of the typical time it takes for a property to sell. The average is an arithmetic average. You add them all up and you divide by how many listings there were. The average can be really skewed by homes that are sold and just take a super long time to sell. If there's just one property that takes a long time to sell, it could drive that average up, especially if you're looking at small markets like zip codes or counties. I always think about it this way: if we're all sitting in a bar and chatting, and we sort of calculate our average income, and then Bill Gates walks into the bar, our average income in that bar shoots up, right? Because of him entering the room. If we use medians, we don't have to worry about those kinds of outliers. This is probably more information than you wanted to know, but again, how we use data to talk about the market, it is very much my opinion that when we talk about prices, when we talk about days on market, we should really be talking about medians, which is meant to reflect the typical metric. Okay, back to what this says. Median days on market, 12 in the first quarter of 2025 in the DC Metro, same in the Bright MLS service area. But as you can see, the market is moving very differently depending on where you are. I'll point out Fairfax and Loudoun County again, where the median days on market is 6. And what that means is half of all homes that sold in the first quarter sold in 6 days or less in Fairfax and Loudoun County. Still a very quick market. You can see DC again looking quite different than the other markets.
Lisa, I have a question, and that was something I use smart charts a lot to get my to publish my newsletter and things like that. And the days on market always did seem a little skewed. And so what I was noodling through on like my farm and stuff is that the days on market, which in our farm is 6 days, is for just those things that have gone under contract. And there are, dozens of properties that are over 30 days, a couple cases over 100 days. So when we look at the number for days on market, and maybe this is just a smart charts thing because it doesn't let you select what's on there. Is it for those things that went under contract as opposed to those things that are sitting not going under contract?
Yes. So the days on market on smart charts, as well as the days on market in the reports that Bright releases that I'm going to show you, are all properties that went under contract in the month. How many, basically thinking of it as how long did it take that home to sell or to get an offer, right? To get it. What you're talking about, I think, is like a super interesting and important stat, particularly now as more and more homes are lingering, or is like some segment of the inventory is lingering. I feel like we need a measure for that too. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think in my micro world, it's just a really big difference between agents properly pricing for the condition of the home, or maybe sellers not being quite tuned into the market and properly expecting the right price for their home, because you can see why things are going to sit. But yeah. Yep.
Okay. That's really, I'm taking notes here. I think what we're trying to do, I have a couple of, I get the benefit of working with a couple of researchers, and we're trying to figure out how to like draw insights from our data and share it back with you. And I think that would be really important, is to see if we can use data to understand why homes are lingering. As you point out, it's most likely that they're not being priced appropriately. But if we can sort of like put some sort of measure around that agents then can use for information when talking to their sellers about how to go ahead and price in a way that will increase speed to sale, like I think that would be super valuable. But to answer your original question, no, this is days on market for properties that went under contract.
Yeah, that's what I suspected. I was never sure, and I'm glad to know that the definitive answer. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely changes. We were talking a little bit about inventory, and I think inventory is a really interesting and listing activity. We had seen sellers really holding back over the last couple of years, and everybody's heard the stories. Interest rates got so low, people locked in a 2.5% or 3% mortgage rate. They didn't want to sell, so they were holding on, and that's why inventory was so low and listing activity was so low. We're starting to see that kind of logjam break up a little bit. Part of it is not because interest rates are falling all that dramatically, but partly I think is there are just, and you guys might have been talking with folks like this, there are homeowners out there who really want to sell, and they do have a really low mortgage rate, and they've been holding off, but at some point sort of life happens effects kind of kick in. I always say, if you have your third child, that 2-bedroom townhouse is just not going to work for you for very much longer. And you may be bummed about giving up a 3% mortgage rate. But the one thing that homeowners have right now is they have a tremendous amount of equity in their homes and can, in essence, sort of roll that equity into their next purchase and almost like buy down the interest rate in some ways if they are able to put a really big down payment down. All that is to say is we have seen an increase in new listing activity across the Bright footprint. It had been a little bit lower in the DC Metro. In fact, at the end of 2024, we had the lowest monthly new listings in more than 30 years in December. And so it was a really slow November, December. We are starting to see more new listings coming onto the market. And here's where I want to talk about kind of thinking through what is happening in the market that is a result of just typical seasonality in the housing market, right? Sales and listing activity tends to increase in March and heading into April. And how much of it may be reflecting stuff that's going on here in the Washington area, in particular, cuts to the federal government workforce, people having to make decisions related to return to the office, general sort of sentiment around the federal government. And so we're trying to kind of parse that out. If you look at the new listings for the first quarter here in the DC metropolitan area, we are up 7.4% compared to where we were a year ago. We're up also in other markets across the Bright footprint, but as you can see, across Bright overall, new listings are up 3.2%. So new listings are increasing, but they are increasing at a faster pace here in our market. So that suggests to me that a couple of things, right? You can sort of decide how you want to talk about this, but I mean, that means if you are a buyer in the market, you should expect to see more listings. You should expect to see more sellers who are ready to negotiate. It also could mean that sellers are going to have to be more thoughtful about pricing because inventory is coming on relatively quickly. I will say again, it depends on where you are. Loudoun County had really fast home sales. I think partly it's because we've also seen a lot more listing activity in Loudoun County. You can see new listings in the first quarter up 21% year over year, and in other places, a much slower pace of increase. So this new listing stuff, I think, is going to be really important to watch. And back in February, it was like a Sunday in the middle of February, and there was some social media post, something that said something like, DOGE is working, federal government workforce fleeing the Washington area. And they put up a picture that said there's 4,000 new listings, home listings in the DC Metro, which they were saying was an indication of all the federal workers selling their home. None of that seemed right to me. So we decided to start tracking this. And I'll show you what we did in just a minute. But before I get to that, all the data that I've been showing so far has been at a monthly basis. And I know a lot of times that's what we have, right? Those are the reports you see. In this changing market, though, I think it's really, really important to be looking at things on a more frequent basis. So we also put out weekly reports. They get sent out via email at 8 a.m. on Tuesday mornings. You can sign up for those in your communication profile on Bright, and I'll show you where to do that. We show, there's a whole bunch of different things we show. I'm just showing you the new listings chart. So just to orientate ourselves, this is just sort of each line is a year, and starting from beginning of January all the way to the end of December. And you can see the orange line is 2025. This is the number of new listings coming onto the market. And again, this includes listings coming on as active and listings coming on as coming soon. So just hold that thought. We'll definitely want to revisit that definition. And you can see that in the DC Metro, we have an increase that looks stronger than the last couple of years, which is the blue lines below it. Not super different from, let's say, 2022, 21. I really should overlay 18 and 19 on this. But the whole point of showing you this is we have resources out there that will allow you to have data that just shows what happened in the market just the week prior. And I think that's going to be more important in this changing market. Looking ahead is also something that people often want to do. And there is the Bright T3 Home Demand Index, which is one tool you can use to help drill down to local neighborhoods to try and see putting lots of things together, data on showings, data on prices, data on listings, to try and predict a little bit or try to look forward a little bit. In this chart on the left is the DC Metro. The darker blue, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can remind myself. The darker blue is markets where demand has been more limited, lighter blue, a little bit stronger, but the red markets are where, according to the Home Demand Index, there's stronger demand. I've zeroed in on Fairfax County on the right-hand side, and you can see the similar colors, but it's by zip code, and you can see where these data are suggesting more intense homebuyer demand. And it looks to me like it's closer in, you can see sort of like closer in by Falls Church and Springfield, and less demand a little bit further out, which kind of makes sense to me if people are, if we do think that people are looking for property or homes closer to DC, closer to job centers, that would sort of make sense to me. So you can use this forward-looking tool to try and help think through where the market may be headed using some data that's all been synthesized. You can get all this information. I'm going to talk, I have a little bit more I want to present, but I wanted to stop here and say you can get all this information at brightmls.com. You don't have to be logged in for most of this stuff. Our monthly market reports are available from the dropdown. Those weekly statistics that get sent out via email on Tuesday are also posted to the web on Monday afternoon. So you can get the weekly statistics. And then that home demand index I just showed, you can also get to from the dropdown menu here at brightmls.com, and then just go to research. On the left is the page that shows you the current monthly reports. As I mentioned, we're releasing March reports tomorrow. So the February is what you can see there. If you look down the list, you can see all of the different regions. And at the bottom, we also have county level data. In these reports, when you click on them, you'll be taken to a folder where you can navigate to the county you want. You'll see market reports for your county broken out by those housing types, single family detached, townhouse, and condo, because as we talked about, those markets can be very different. And on the right is a snapshot of the weekly statistics that we put out. Down below each of these, you'll see my face on the left. You'll see Erica's face on the right. We do little market videos. I always say if people don't want to read or don't want to report and they would rather listen to a 2-minute video, we make sure that we have those videos available as well. I want to just show you the luxury report just because it's so beautiful. We do a quarterly luxury report. The first quarter report will be out the first week of May. And as I mentioned, this is a market that has been operating very differently in the past year or so. So we share stats at the Bright level, but we also pull out stats for the Washington, D.C. area, which frankly has been home to the highest luxury sales, has been home to the local markets with the greatest share of luxury sales. It's really kind of a fun market to watch, but I do think it's one where there are going to be some changes here in 2025, and we're hoping to be able to share that. The luxury report is worth it just for the pictures, in my opinion. They're just like, we don't do these fancy pictures for our other reports, but for this one we do. And then I mentioned the home demand index, which you can get to from our website in the research dropdown. There's also a standalone site, homedemandindex.com. And I will point out, and I'm sure you already know this, when you're in search, if you are logged in, I just search for property here in Frederick County where I live. And at the bottom of the search, property information is also the home demand index for that zip code in which that property is located. I'm going to pause there because I know I just covered a ton of stuff. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the factors affecting the housing market here, in particular, the federal workforce stuff, and then also a little bit around private exclusive listings and some industry changes. But before I do that, I wanted to pause and see if there are questions. And that's fine if there are not. Okay, so what to watch in 2025? I think, first of all, I'll say if there's anybody out there who is telling you they know exactly where the housing market is headed in 2025, I would take it all with a grain of salt. Here's the way I'm thinking about it. And you guys are the first people I'm trying this out on. But so here's the way that I'm thinking about what the spring market will be impacted by. I think on the left of this scale, we have factors that could really spur a busy spring home buying season. Mortgage rates are finally starting to come down. And while they're still in the mid sixes, I do think they're going to come down a little bit further. And, people used to say, oh, well, rates have to come down, to the 5% before buyers are going to get into the market. And I just think we're in a period where buyers and sellers have kind of re-anchored their expectations about rates. I mean, we had rates close to 8%, in the past 6 months. Rates have been hovering around 7%, persistently sticking at 7%. Any movement lower, I think, is enough to entice buyers to come into the market, particularly if they think that that they may bounce back up again. So lower rates could bring more buying activity into the Washington area market. More inventory is also key. As we saw in the Loudoun County situation, there were more home sales, but there were also more listings. And so maybe that is, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? You need more homes to choose from to bring more buyers in. Those are the things that I really think, and as we're watching, could make the spring housing market pretty busy. On the right-hand side are all the things that I'm seeing as headwinds to the spring market. We know that the overall economy is changing. The last jobs numbers that came out were pretty strong, but we are seeing some evidence of weaker labor market conditions. The unemployment rate's ticking up a little bit. There's been more private sector layoffs. Fewer people are switching jobs, which is a sign that people are feeling anxious about their job. We know from other measures like the consumer confidence index that consumers are feeling more worried now than they have since 2020. So they're more anxious now, worried about the economy now. The highest level of anxiety in the last 5 or 6 years. And then, as I mentioned, with the stock market declining, with uncertainty around tariffs and other economic policies, there's concerns that those issues could cause people to hold back and not make big decisions like buying or selling their home. As you can see, I've kind of got the scale level here because I still think it's an open question on what's going to win out. In the Washington area, we have one added piece that I think tips the scale to a more cautious outlook for the spring housing market. And so I have Doge up there. And what I mean by that is there are other factors at play that are generating additional uncertainty in the housing market, not for everybody. And those who are unaffected by layoffs and who have really stable jobs and are seeing their income growing, this is going to be a great market for them to be in if they're buyers in the Washington area. For others, though, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. And the key reason for that is the federal government is a pretty large employer in the Washington area. About 14% of all workers in the greater Washington area, and I've included an area beyond that smaller metro we were just looking at, but about 14% of that larger greater DC area are federal civilian government employees. It varies a lot, right? It varies from about 8% up in Frederick and Loudoun counties in Virginia, and then more than 1 out of 5 workers in Charles County, Maryland, for example, is a federal government worker. You can see the share in Arlington, Alexandria is pretty high, close to 20%. The interesting thing about the federal workforce in the DC area is it's pretty, it skews a little old. Nearly half of federal government workers are age 50 and older. So as we're watching these layoffs come, and as we're watching some of the processes to encourage people to leave their job, there are a lot of folks who are just pretty close to retirement and may decide to take offers to take early retirement or to otherwise leave federal government employment. The one thing I will say is, because the federal government workforce is a little bit older, they do tend to be homeowners, and they are more likely than younger workers to have a lot of equity built up in their home, maybe even have their home paid off. And so just because we see cuts to the federal workforce, and even though that's a big part of our economy, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have this spillover effect into our housing market. We have the greatest share of 2 worker households of any metro area in the country. So, if you lose your job, you're partnered up or married to someone who hasn't lost their job, there's going to be, some buffer that people are going to experience. But we do want to track this because it is important, and it is not just the federal government. As you all are well aware, there's private sector employment here in the Washington area that is closely tied to the federal government. So cuts to contracts can also affect the private sector, which could also then have people contemplating decisions about where to live, whether they need to sell a home or whether they need to buy a new home. I'm putting my glasses on. I realize this is tiny. I'm going to make sure you know where to find it, brightmls.com/DC tracker. As I mentioned, back in February, we got this social media post where people were calling us saying, is it true? Is it true? Are people dumping homes onto the market? So we started tracking listing activity and some other metrics to try and understand if there really is a Doge effect here in the greater Washington area. I'm going to point out a couple of things. New listings is the first column. It's the number of new listings coming onto the market each week, and then compared to a year ago during the same week, and then compared to the week prior. If you look, some of the further out counties, Stafford County, Virginia, Calvert County, Maryland, Charles County, Maryland, you can see compared to a year ago, new listings are up 30, 50, 70%. Now, that's just 1 week's of data. And if you look, it's pretty small numbers, 97 new listings in Stafford, for example. But those are some of the things that we're starting to watch. We have seen that some of the further out jurisdictions, Frederick County, Charles County, Stafford, Spotsylvania, in some weeks have had more new listing activity than other parts of the region. If you look at the greater DC region line, 18.4% year over year in terms of new listing activity. The bottom line is Bright, and that's at 17%. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm not sure I'm seeing some big impact on listing activity that's super different here in the Washington area than it is in the Bright area overall. So we're watching it. I think it's still a little bit too early to tell. The other thing I'm watching is how many sellers are dropping their prices. And I think that's another really interesting metric. If you see here, last week, this is the week ending April 6th, though, this past week, 8.9% of homes that were on the market, active on the market, had a price drop during the week. That's 1.6 percentage points higher than a year ago. What that means is, like, a year ago, this number would have been 7.3%. So that's a pretty that's a noticeable, interesting, worth watching data point that more sellers appear to be dropping their home price. And it could be they're reacting to the fact that the market's changing and they maybe were shooting too high and now are being advised by the real estate professional that, that they need to reset expectations. It could be some sellers who are worried about Doge and worried about a softening housing market and saying, I want to bring buyers in quickly, so let's drop the price. So I think these are going to be a lot more conversations that sellers are going to be having with you, because we're seeing an uptick in the number of listings where the price has been dropped. That's the listing side, which we're hearing so much about. But I do want to point out that there is still a lot of buyer interest in the greater Washington area. And as you can see, the number of new pending contracts in this greater Washington area in this first week of April, we're up 18.3% compared to where we were a year ago. Again, if you look down at the bottom line, that's Bright. New pending contract activity is only up 13% in the broader Bright footprint, where we have stronger demand here compared to a year ago than the overall Bright footprint, which includes Philly and Eastern Shore and Central PA and Baltimore. So we are updating this tracker every Monday, and you can find it at brightmls.com/DC tracker. If you're talking with people who are saying, I hear the market is tanking here in the Washington area. No, but here's the things that we're watching to see if we can see a shift in the market. Before I move on, I have one more thing to talk about. I said I wasn't going to talk that long, and here it's almost been an hour. Before I go on, I want to see, are there any questions about any of this, stuff we're tracking related to the federal workforce changes, or anything else you think would be helpful to see so you can advise the folks you're talking to?
Lisa, this data is amazing, and it is super helpful. I'm wondering, I know you can slice and dice till forever, but like slicing data like this for condos versus the rest of the market, is that something that's available? Is that, I guess, through smart charts? I love smart charts. I'm in there a lot, but I wish I could have more than one slice at a time, right? Like I want. Is that something that you guys are tracking or publishing?
We should. So when you go to our website and look for monthly reports, we will have condos out separately by county. But as you point out, we're not slicing it and dicing. We're not like doing 3-bedroom condos or condos above 500,000 or something like that. But I am making a note. I think you're bringing up something I think is very relevant in this market. Is when you look at the condo inventory, we're at 114% of where we were prior to the pandemic in terms of available listings. That's the only segment of the market where there's more inventory now than there was in 2019. And so, I'm wondering if there are going to be buyers out there, first-time buyers out there, who are going to start taking another look at condos, because that's where I think there's more room for folks to negotiate. The other thing I'm also interested in, and maybe this is what you were getting at a little bit, is will there be a demand for condominiums close in? I'm wondering if people who moved further out during the pandemic and now are being called back to the office, are there going to be some segments of the population who say, hey, let me buy a studio condo or a 1-bedroom condo close in. I'll still live with my family further out, but have that close in when I have to be at the office? Does that seem crazy that people might do that?
Lisa, I have a great one for sale if anyone has a client in that category.
Good to know.
I'm with you, seriously though. And I was hoping that would happen. And I don't know, somebody might object, but I haven't seen it yet. But I thought that exact same thing would happen.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I haven't seen that much. My concern is more on the flip side of where I think the months worth of inventory are going to skew really high on condos, because it's a lot of younger people. And if they're losing their job, condos tend to be single income earners, small condos especially, and they don't have that much equity and they're kind of stuck, and condo fees are going up. So they might be the people that are forced to sell, versus, as you alluded, like the older people affected by Doge that are fine. They're sitting on a bunch of equity. So we might start to see like 6 or 8 months worth of condo inventory, but we're still at 1 month worth of townhouse and detached home inventory.
I wouldn't be surprised. Nobody asked this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. The thing that I don't think we do a very good job tracking is the rental side of things. And I also think that's going to be really relevant. It's always relevant, but I'm really trying to figure out a way for us to do a better job of tracking. I mean, are people making decisions to rent instead of buy? And how is that transition happening differently in our marketplace, given the uncertainty? So that's another thing I want to track.
Hey, Lisa, I had a question as well, and I apologize in advance. I'm homesick today, so that's why my voice sounds bad. But anyways, my question is, I don't know about you all, but almost every client I've interacted with, buyers and sellers in the last month or two, they've all been asking, for my prognostication on what's going to happen with, is it a good time to sell, or should we wait to sell or keep selling it? Should we wait to buy or buy now? And with Doge and everything else going on, is there going to be more inventory coming to the market near the end of the year? So it's asking us to prognosticate, and those are a lot of the conversations we've had, and I know you've touched on that a lot already. But as far as like future casting, if you were in our shoes talking with the consumers, how would you talk to them about that from a buyer and seller perspective?
You're not going to like the answer because it's I think what the decision to whether you need to buy or sell now or later is so personal, right, to your individual circumstances. I think right now that sentence is even truer. Like, okay, so I do a forecast every 6 months. The last forecast was back in November. I don't even look at it anymore. I don't even use it in presentations anymore. It's not even relevant anymore because things have changed so much. And it's hard to forecast in the best of situations. And right now things are uncertain. So all those caveats aside, if you're here in the Washington area and you are looking to buy a home, mortgage rates are going to be volatile here over the next few months, likely. So my advice would be make sure you're set up with your lender. Make sure that if you want to jump on rates when they drop, to be ready to do so, because we might see week to week volatility. We might see rates fall as low as 6.2% one week and then back up to 6.6% the next week. So being ready to act if you are a serious buyer in the market right now is going to be really important, I think. Rates aren't going to come down below 6% unless we go into a full-blown recession. Nobody wants that, so let's not hope for that. But I think rates are going to stay in around 6.5%, but they are going to be pretty volatile. People want to be kind of watching that pretty closely. As far as inventory goes, I do expect we're going to see more listings come onto the market. I think that even aside from the Doge situation, I think we are going to see inventory increase. People who have been waiting to sell because of life changes are going to do so, and there may be more to choose from later in the year. But I also think there'll be more buyers out there later in the year, so I think there'll be more competition. So the short answer is, I think if you're a buyer and you want to wait, you could find that you'll have more to choose from later in the year, but you may be competing with more buyers, and interest rates probably won't be all that much better. What do you think of that?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very similar to the answer or response I've been giving. My only follow-up question, that the thing I haven't been saying is that there might be more buyers at the end of the year. What would be the explanation for that, for there being more buyers near the end of the year too?
Yeah. So I think that we know there's significant pent-up demand in the market. And we can see that in a bunch of different ways. One of my favorite stats is if you look at people in their 30s right now, if they had the same homeownership rates as people did in their 30s 20 years ago, like when I was in my 30s, there'd be 750,000 more homeowners in America. Like that's a bunch of catch up we still need to do. And so the people who have been sidelined for a long time. And if we assume that the uncertainty that we're in now will be worked through, people will feel more confident by the end of the year, more inventories out there. And so with that growing confidence, I expect we'll see more people. The people who want to buy homes haven't disappeared. They're still waiting. And I think they're waiting for the uncertainty to kind of loosen up and for more listings to come on. And that's why I think there'll be more buyers in the market in the second half of the year.
Well, Whit, you have your hand up.
Thank you.
Yes, Lisa, great presentation. Thank you for presenting this. One question that I have is on the Loudoun County. You mentioned that there's more pendings and more closed sales compared to the last year. Do you have any attribution study why you think that's the case? Is it because of plenty of new constructions there or any other factors?
I'm fascinated by Loudoun County. Can I just say that? I think that part of it is Loudoun County traditionally has been a little bit more affordable than some parts of Fairfax County when you get further out. I think more new construction has helped. There isn't a lot of new construction in the DC area generally, but Loudoun County is one place where there's more new homes going up. We've had a lot of job growth in Loudoun County. When you look at where jobs have been added in the greater Washington area, it's not Montgomery County, it's not DC, it's not Fairfax, it's Loudoun County is where jobs are being added. So that has been a big attractor as well. So I think the fact that there's more new construction, there's more supply. I think Loudoun County is also a county because of its demographics where there's a greater share of move-up buyers, people who are having kids, needing to move up. And so there's more velocity in the market simply because there's more move-up buyers as opposed to a place like Arlington or DC maybe where there's younger people who are staying put for a little bit longer. They're not ready to make that move up because they don't have kids, they didn't get married, those kinds of things. So I think demographics also explains a little bit why Loudoun County is a busier market.
And I'll just chime in. It's so funny because I'm a potential buyer looking in Loudoun County second half of the year, and it's because I'm a move up. It's a little bit more affordable than getting closer to DC to get more house. So I literally fall in that exact bucket.
Can I tell you something too? I was on a panel with the Loudoun County Economic Development Director. I don't know the numbers exactly, so you guys know them better than I do. The property tax rate in Loudoun County is much lower than in lots of other places. And part of that is because of all the data centers they have out there, which is, he was quick to point out. But that could be another reason why Loudoun is so attractive to folks.
Thank you, Lisa.
Paul, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just checking in terms of like leading indicators, do you feel like showings is a good leading indicator correlation wise with like what's going to happen with like all these other stats?
I used to, right? So you used to be able to take showings in like, let's say a county or zip code in 1 month and be able to get a sense of where new offers would be in 2 months hence or 1 month hence. I think we're getting back to that. What I saw in the data, and I'm gonna is it okay if I stop sharing my screen just for now? I do have more to talk about, but I can send the rest of it to you guys. Let me stop sharing here. Have I stopped sharing? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. It's that way I don't have to like stare in the void. So what we saw in the data, I think, and you guys can tell me what you think, is so we saw showing data, the number of showings pull back pretty notably in the fall. Here's what I think. You guys tell me what you think. With the NAR settlement and the requirements to sign the buyer agent agreement, we heard that prospective buyers were going to open houses instead of calling a real estate agent to go to showings. And so we were seeing less showing data. We were seeing fewer showings, even though there was still, let's say, the same level of buyer interest. So in general, I think that started to shift back a little bit. But for a while, I was like, man, this showing data doesn't really make any sense because showings were down so much, but new pending contracts were still on the rise. But so to answer your question, it should be a leading indicator, and it hasn't always been as reliable as I would have expected. Sure. I thought, and if it's okay with you, I thought what I would do is I'll share the deck with you. We did some research on exclusive listings that I was going to share, but I can definitely just share the deck with you guys and check it out. Or if you're game, I can pull it back up. That's fine too. It's your meeting. You guys decide. I just don't want to hold you here against your will.
I'd love to see that data on private exclusives. I also just put in the chat in the fall, historically, buyer activity also slows to a trickle the closer we get to elections. There's the uncertainty and they don't know which path is going to be the one that gives them more confidence.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I don't know, NVAR did a really good study with George Mason. And if you look back historically, the presidential election historically doesn't have that big of an impact on the housing market. Like, as you point out, some people delay or pull back or pull forward decisions. But when you look at the aggregate numbers at the end of the day, we don't see a big impact of a change of presidential administrations on the housing market. This is no typical presidential administration change. Like, what's going on now is different. And I do think there is a potential for an impact on the housing market. Just as an aside. Okay, let me see if I can pull this back up again. I'm going to do this again, see if I can screw it up one more time. All right. Did anybody see the weekly tracker where we were before? Yes?
Yep.
No?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. Okay. So in addition to all these economic changes and all these changes at the federal government, we all know there's lots of changes going on at the industry level in terms of changes to broker business models. We know that NAR has tweaked CCP a little bit, and there's all sorts of things going on that could that I find it all a little confusing, and I know you guys are trying to keep up to speed on all of it. And in general, though, from a research standpoint, I'm trying to figure out are some of the changes we're seeing in the market, are they sort of temporary? Are the policy changes going to have an impact on buyers and sellers? What should we expect going forward? One of the big things that I was interested in looking at was how the rise, and it is a rise, which I'll show you in just a second, how the increase in the number of listings that are being held as office exclusives, is that having an impact on our housing market? And so we at Bright are in a little bit of a unique position. For the last year, we've had this system of intake. If you are working with a seller who has asked for their home to be withheld from distribution on the MLS and marketed as a private exclusive listing, we have a system where that information is entered into the Bright MLS system, not disseminated out, but can be used for research. So that's what we did here, is we were able to look and see what the trends are in office exclusives. So we have 6 months of data. We looked back to September, kind of, I don't know, there was so much going on with the NAR settlement. We thought, let's look at September to now. That gives us 100,000 home sales transactions in the Bright MLS footprint. And we can kind of see if we can see what's going on in terms of office exclusives. I'm just going to go, there's 5 findings. I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll show you where you can get the report. What we found in our market is that the number of listings coming on as an office exclusive is small, but it's growing. But for a while, we'd seen pretty steady 2 to 4% of new listings coming onto the market, coming into the system each month. About 2 to 4% of them were coming in as an office exclusive listing. In this fourth quarter of 2024, we saw an increase, and in 2025, almost 8% of new listings entered into the Bright MLS system were office exclusive listings. Part of that could be just office exclusives coming out of the shadows. Maybe they weren't, brokers weren't following the rules, weren't putting them in before, and now they are. But I think based on other data we're seeing nationally that there are more brokerages that are sort of doubling down maybe on an office exclusive strategy. What we did find, though, is even those listings that are pre-marketed as an office exclusive, almost all of them transition to a standard listing within the MLS where they are broadly disseminated to subscribers via the MLS. So nearly 90% of those office exclusives are ultimately marketed and listed as an active or coming soon listing before they go under contract. I found that really interesting. In fact, half of the office exclusives transition to a coming soon status, which feels more restrictive than an office exclusive status in some ways. But I do think part of this is folks figuring out, the best way to serve their sellers, how to make sure that they're marketing properties in a way that meets what their sellers are looking for. But what we found is that it seems like brokers and agents really understand that the value of getting those listings in front of as many buyer eyeballs as possible by disseminating them on the MLS. We looked at some outcomes for sellers, and there's been a lot of chatter out there from both sides of the argument about whether office exclusives are good for sellers or not good for sellers. So we decided just to look at the data and see what we found. And we found that in our market, homes that are pre-marketed as an office exclusive take about 2 weeks longer to go under contract compared with listings that start out as a standard listing within the Bright MLS system. That is that pre-marketing where, maybe the agent is testing pricing or doing other things. But what we found is it adds about 15 days to the time between when the listing is entered and when the home goes under contract. We also found that, again, contrary to maybe some other things we might hear out there, is that when you control for characteristics of the home and you kind of look at homes in similar neighborhoods, listings that begin as an office exclusive listing don't provide any sort of price advantage to sellers. There's no higher price, office exclusive listings don't get a higher price than listings that begin as a standard listing and are broadly marketed within the MLS. The last thing we found is there are some markets, and I will say they are dominantly, that's not a word. They are very highly concentrated in the Washington, D.C. area, in the district itself, in the close-in suburbs. There are some neighborhoods where the number of listings that are held as office exclusive listings account for 20, 25, as much as 29% of the overall inventory in the market. So you could make the case that there is this practice is, unless you're a buyer connected with the office that holds that exclusive listing, those listings are basically invisible to you, and so it can be an added burden for buyers in this already sort of tight inventory market that we've at least had over the last couple of years. And so those are the sort of key findings. You can see all of this in the report. It's our graphics folks made it pretty and easy to read, I think. And if you do access it and you have some questions at the end of the day, you are more than welcome to reach out to me. As part of this research, our marketing and communications team put together some resources on listing options within Bright. I mean, the whole purpose of office exclusive listings, the way we hear it, is that sellers want flexibility in how their home is marketed. And so while there is a lot of flexibility within the Bright system, it was clear that maybe that wasn't always surfaced to agents who are entering listings. So at this resource, you can find some detailed information on how to make use of internet yes, no, to make use of coming soon, and how to make use of limited marketing and office exclusives within the Bright system so that the sellers can have the options that they want in this market. I'm going to leave you with that, and I'll close down in just a sec. I want to make sure that you have this website, brightmls.com/research. All of the stuff we talked about today on housing market statistics is all available there. We also do a monthly survey of agents and brokers who have worked with buyers and sellers in the prior month, where we gain insights on what they're hearing on the ground, and we release that survey data every quarter. It's really interesting stuff, in my opinion. I do write commentary on economic data every week. Inflation, interest rates, jobs, pending home sales at the national level. It's all out there. It's in little paragraph form. If it's ever anything you want to include in a newsletter or use in communication with your clients, it's all available for you. And then, like I said, the luxury report just for the pictures. You can find all that under research. I showed you where the market reports were. If you go to news and insights, you can kind of browse all the things we do. We write some blogs as well. You can see all of that. And again, you don't need to be logged in. Your clients can come on and look at this. If you're talking to elected officials sometimes call us up, say, hey, I saw this on your website. And then just to let you know who we are, I am privileged to work with a couple of really great researchers, Erica and Colby. If you ever think, hey, I wonder if Bright has this information about the market, or I wonder if they can help me understand what I'm seeing here, please don't hesitate to reach out, research@brightmls.com. And we love getting requests like that. And that's what we're here for. All right, so with that, that's all I got. I'm gonna stop my share And yeah, if there's other questions, happy to take them.
Hey everyone, it's Jeff Giles here on Team DDA. I have a question about the coming soon status. I'm lukewarm on coming soons. I'm just not a fan of them. I think it's the biggest tease to buyers because you can't see them. You know, it really only provides awareness. And then since they lifted the number of weeks you can make a coming soon, there's a couple coming soons I saw that were for June, which I just want to ask the group. I only work with buyers, so would love to just hear from the listing specialists the advantage to a buyer for a coming soon that's weeks away or months away. But thank you for sharing the stat of 45%. I thought it was much lower, so it is interesting that 45% do start as coming soon. But just curious about the coming soon status and why you use it and stuff like that.
I can speak on this because I've got opinions about it. I mean, you know, like we are putting all of our listings in as soon as it's signed. Our admin is putting it right into exclusive. Not that our sellers always want to see it, but we're actually giving you buyer agents a reason to be like, hey, we have an upcoming listing, even if it's not till June. It makes you look really good, right? So I'm surprised to hear that you don't see the value of that, because we spend time of getting it in there for, you know, to give, we say it's a 3-step process. First step is getting it office exclusive, so we can, you know, we've got 90,000 in our brokerage. Second step is coming soon, you know, to like get everybody knowing and trying to get as many people in that first weekend when it's active on the market. So, you know, there are times when sellers are like, I would just love to just not have to go through all of it. And, you know, if you have a buyer that's willing to pay me what I'd be happy with, great. We don't have to go through the whole thing. And now you have to educate them, like, you might miss out on somebody paying you 50,000 more. As long as you understand that you're the decision maker, we're just your consultants. So I am hoping that other teams and agents will start putting theirs in to give us buyer agents an advantage too. You know, because there's not a lot of EXP agents are still not putting their listings in there. And I don't want to be, you know, the minority when we're trying to, you know, help our fellow agents.
Yeah, definitely echo what Megan said. Thank you for going first so I could save some words. We're definitely entering all of ours in and couldn't agree more. Lisa, I had a question for you on, you know, as a econ major and taking a million statistics classes, I'm always curious as to the method that was used in the research. I've never seen the method shown that you guys use for this research on off-market homes or office exclusives, and I'm very curious to know what that is. Would that be in the report? Because to me, it's kind of like saying the sky is blue to say they take longer, because yeah, we put them in longer as like the first step in that 3-step process that Megan said. So that seems very self-evident, and to me, that's not proof to a consumer that, oh, it takes longer to sell and you'll sell for less. And I think often the types of properties that sellers don't want to deal with getting ready are different condition and different quality properties than one where you have a seller who has the pride of ownership and well maintained and upgraded and wants to put it on. So I've never been convinced it's apples to apples comparing off market to on market.
And I'm glad you mentioned the off, like the way that you phrased it. We did a on MLS, off MLS study like in 2023, I guess, that people sometimes still reference, and in my opinion, sometimes incorrectly, to talk about the comparing on MLS listings with office exclusives. That prior study was really just looking at anything that sells off the MLS versus those that are listed on MLS. So for sale by owners, like other private sales, are all in that bucket. The current study just looks at the ones you're talking about, where, as you point out, you and your seller have decided to start the listing as an office exclusives for whatever reason. And we are very sensitive to this, wanting to compare apples to apples. The methodology is in the report. What we did was we tried to basically use statistical methods to find two properties that were otherwise identical. And I'm going to use quotes on that and come back to that in a second. Otherwise identical, but for the fact that one began in office exclusive status and the other began as a standard listing. That was the theory behind the methodology. We can only include characteristics of the property that we have data on. So to your point, if there is something about the seller, the pride of ownership, those things that we don't have data on, we could certainly be misrepresenting the characteristics of the homes in that. But what we've tried to do is account for neighborhood characteristics, size, number of bedrooms, age of the property, whether it's a waterfront property, whether it's a condo, all sorts of characteristics to try and get as close to an apples to apples comparison as possible. And I think you're right. I think what you're saying, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Look, you're telling me office exclusives take longer to sell. And what you've said to me is, right, yeah, that's the point. Nobody is saying anything different. I think what we were trying to understand is, sometimes we have heard language out there that suggests that office exclusives are a benefit to sellers. And we just wanted to make sure that both pieces were sort of like examined, both the price piece and the time to sale piece.
Got it. Thank you. We'll check out that methodology.
Please do. And please shoot me an email or whatever if you have any questions. You're like, well, I don't know, I still don't think I buy it. I'd love to hear back because I'm always trying to think of ways. Like look, we're all among friends here. I don't have a horse in this race. Like my whole interest is in research. So if we can think of a better way to examine what's important to home buyers and sellers in the market, I just want to figure out a better way to do the research on that.
And Lisa, I'll give an unpopular, well, maybe probably popular opinion in this group, maybe unpopular in the larger agent community. But I think this private exclusive thing is, man, that is a tough nut to crack because there's really two categories of why sellers / agents are doing it. And one category is for self-interest. I have something that the rest of the community doesn't. And the other category is my seller has a legitimate reason. Like I have one right now where my seller literally just had a baby. And for an amazing buyer, they will pack up the baby and the dog and the toddler and arrange for a showing. But they don't really want to, they're not really in a position to do that for another, month and a half. And there probably is an easy way, like some conclusions you can draw based on different brokerages and their public announcements around how they feel about this kind of thing, but it's really hard to separate out the data into which ones fall into which case. But the answers would be very different.
Totally. That's really interesting. So what I've wondered is, and again, we're all here just chatting. What I've wondered is that scenario that you described, and the people who are like, I don't know, court judges or professional athletes, like all those people who desire privacy. I feel like that's been in that 2 to 4% for the last bunch of years. Like I feel like what it just feels different now, and that's what I was trying to see if I could figure out, like whether and maybe that's what I didn't figure out, like whether the reasons for the rise in office exclusives is different, and whether we should care, right? Whether we should care. So anyway, I think it's like a really interesting question. We've often talked too about the impact on sellers. I'm really super interested in the question that was asked about, how are we thinking about how buyers are able to see what's available for sale, like just in general, and I think giving more options to sellers, and now I'm totally out of my wheelhouse, giving more options to sellers, I think we also need to think about what does that mean on the buy side? Like if you say internet no, that's great. And so that means that I'm a buyer and I'm out there on Zillow and I can't see that home. What does that mean for that buyer? You know what I mean? I'm just spitballing here. You should make me stop talking because I'm going to get into stuff that I'm not authorized to talk about, I'm pretty sure. But as I said, you guys are where the rubber hits the road. So if there's other information that is helpful for you to be able to answer questions your consumers have, then please don't hesitate to reach out. That's like my mission in life, is to do that kind of research.
I have one suggestion. You were talking about that post that, kind of went viral a few weeks ago. It would have been awesome for Bright to have countered that with facts and put a post out that telling us all, share this. This is the real data, because everybody shared that post and said this is false. But did anybody necessarily have really good apples to apples data to back it up? I don't know. Somebody probably went to that length, but that, I think something like that is really helpful for your subscribers.
For sure. So we actually did put it out on that Tuesday morning. So we saw the social media on Sunday and we put it out on Tuesday morning. But I think what you're getting at is we didn't do a good job of getting it to you all in the right way.
I mean, we could poll people. Did anybody see that?
Right. No.
Raise your hand. Katie, did you?
I did not. And
No, nobody saw it. So you
I'll
guys worked
go,
so
like-
hard on this, and we want to make sure we see things. And I'm pretty like on, people make fun of me because I'm so on top of all these forums and notice everything. And I know I didn't see it, and I don't think any of us did, and we're all pretty plugged in. So maybe a better way of making sure that gets out to us, because that was so huge, that post. Everybody asked me about it. It was so annoying, you know.
Let me ask you a question while I have you. Because I don't because I know our folks put it on the social media channels, but you said something about forums. Like, where should we get this information to you? You don't want another email from Bright MLS. I guarantee you don't want another email.
Well, you could get it out to brokers, you know. I don't know if you have a way of, you know, easily connecting with brokers, and then they would get it out to their groups. I mean, I'm kind of referring, you know, a lot of the title companies have groups. We certainly have our group that Emily and Bick run.
That's cool.
I don't know, almost an email to your subscribers. I know you probably are use that sparingly to not spam people. I don't know. Does anybody have a suggestion on the best way that Bright could get really important things like that out to us?
So I was gonna say, I think, and maybe you have it, but I was gonna say maybe partnering up, because when you were saying you're out of your wheelhouse with talking about some of the stuff, I would say maybe partnering up with some local agents to come up with some objection type newsletters, because we don't need newsletters for random stuff, but I think objection newsletters would be great based on data to just share. It'll add some parity, because even with the office exclusive, I think sometimes buyers can actually turn that into a negative in their mind and think that they're paying a premium, which sometimes does happen. But like you just said, the data doesn't show that getting the house off market is bringing the seller any extra money. But buyers will say that, you know, so there's so much stuff that we hear all the time that you all don't hear, that while you have the data, I think like just an objection email that would circulate would be great.
I like this idea too. Like I've got this in my head, this idea of like almost like Mythbusters or fact versus fiction, or like the real deal. I don't know, something clever like that, that gets at not like, here's just the boring stats, but it's like, here's what you all might be hearing. Here's what the data see. And like, we have enough avenues to kind of connect with you all to say, well, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that we could put something like that together. I really like this idea. And I think we need to think through how to get this kind of information out.
I mean, a lot of this information is probably not trackable because, like, you know, like we know of one that it was listed at 195 and they would have taken 195 pre-market, goes to the market, sells for 2.1, right? But like, you guys don't see those stats of like what was actually submitted, what was the pre-market price, what was the list price versus what was the close price. So there's some of that you wouldn't know.
We do see, if the price is entered into MLS, we do see that, but you're talking about even discussions before it goes.
Right, like there's almost like stories of like, you know, when you're talking about like buyers aren't necessarily believing us, you know, that like, you know, is it overpriced at this pre-market? Maybe, maybe not. Like you might be saving yourself $100,000 by paying this price, by not going on the market. Or you might be paying over $100,000 if it sat on the market for 2 months. Like I don't have a crystal ball, buyer. So I'm just your consultant. Like, here's the options, here's the possible outcomes, but like, here's some stories we can tell you, but I only have my own stories. I don't have, you know, Jennifer's or, you know, I don't have everybody else's stories.
Yeah. No, you're getting at it. Yeah.
I don't know how you get that data from, I guess it would probably mostly be from listing agents, like a quick, like, quick like questionnaire that's really easy for people to figure out, like, hey, did you show this property pre-market? Did you get pre-market like offers? What were they? You know, how much below or above? And like that would be maybe useful information.
That's where I would say, going back to if they collaborated, I think with the data, there's always a story to counter the data, but then being able to balance the data, this is what we're showing, with also here is a story that counters that, and then it gives us a nice round picture to deliver to our buyers and sellers to kind of be like, hey, the data shows this, so this is what's happening, but this also can happen. Here it is. And like, it's still both facts, right? One is data driven, one is experiential, but it's both.
That's great. The you mentioned the listing agents, and I think that's really right what we need to find. I mentioned we do a survey every month, and I know people hate surveys, but we do get about between 700 and 800 listing agents to respond to our survey each month. So I mean, maybe we have a vehicle to start to kind of collect some data that could help answer some of these questions behind the scenes. I'm just talking out loud here.
Does Bright have an agent advisory group? I'm sure you do, right?
Yeah, well, we have them for specialized reasons. You know what I mean? Like when there's listing management changes, we get a group together. When there's this thing, we get a group together. Maybe we just, And I think my experience is if I ever reach out to an agent and say, hey, would you mind helping me out with this? Everybody always says yes. Like, so I think we could definitely get people to sit around and kind of figure out the best way to do this and answer some of these questions.
Oh, definitely. You would definitely get guesses from our group. We are very collaborative. We want to help. We want our industry to be better. We want our tools to be better that we're all paying a lot of money for. So don't forget about us if you ever need anything.